Morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure for me to come here this morning and talk to you. I'd say two things just to kick off with. The emphasis for me is very much on the ing in the Rebuilding a Great Tradition banner that we put under this discussion this morning. It's much more. I've been with Arnott's for 2.5 years, and we really are proud of some of the progress we've made with the store, but we really are sort of partly down the road of what we hope to achieve. We're certainly not there yet. And secondly, I think with these, to set in context, it's sometimes easy for speakers like me to stand here and sound a bit smug and critical of previous management regimes of companies, etc. And I just want to sort of say that whilst it may sound that way, certainly with Arnott's, that's certainly not what I'm trying to do, and also to hopefully put that in context for you. I'm assuming you all know Arnott's. We've been there on the north side for 168 years. It's a very old retail brand in Ireland. I think we always score very highly in surveys in terms of who knows us and who doesn't. I think 97% of the population of Ireland know Arnott's. I have to say I've never met the other three. So, you know, we have a real gem there, and I'll rewind 3 years back to the tail end of 2009, just to set the scene. Arnott's was in very serious financial trouble, which is well documented. I won't labour it, but I'm sure you're aware that the debts that had been built up were in main due to the fact of a planned property development scheme called the Northern Quarter, which was actually on the brink of kicking off. Obviously, the times that we were in then and are now, to a certain extent, wouldn't permit something of that magnitude to take place. So really, that's exactly what happened. The property development was canned. So the banks were left owed an awful lot of money, and therefore, I guess, took a long, hard look at Arnott's and just wondered what to do with it. There was some speculation of us going into administration. I guess at a point in time that was a real possibility. When you owe money of the magnitude that we did or do, then you have to face facts and be realistic, and banks think that way. So I guess back to 2009, early 2010, that was when I first got involved. I came over to Ireland early in 2007, so I had one boom year, and the rest have been very interesting, probably a bit more character building than the first one. But I got involved with Arnott's, and really our remit, I was a consultant for 6 months working with a group of guys from the States called Paladin Capital. We were all brought in to have a look at Arnott's. It was a great 6 months. It did convince me that I never want to be a consultant for a living and I want to be a retailer. So fortunately, that's where I've ended up. 6 months of carrying my laptop around wasn't quite me, but it was a great experience. And really, our remit was to take a look at Arnott's and see what we thought. It took about 10 minutes to look under the lid of Arnott's and conclude that underneath all the chaos, there was a really fantastic retail brand, which I think was a bit lost, clearly, and I think probably due to the emphasis of management time and effort being on the property development side of things, naturally, really, rather than the retail side of things. Retail is I can bore you for hours on it, which I hopefully won't, but with retail, you sort of live, eat, and breathe it, and you have to be involved in every minute detail of it, and if you take your eye off the ball for a minute, then woe betide you. And I think the focus away from retail and more on the property had led Arnott's into inevitable trouble. However, I think when we looked underneath it and concluded Arnott's had a lot of pluses, but I would say going back to that time, the one thing that amazed me was the brand itself. And I think I maybe touch on it a bit later, but people don't necessarily, I think there's this confusion as to whether these stores are just department stores or whether they're brands in their own right. They're very much brands in their own right, and they have to be to succeed. I've had the privilege of working for Harrods for 14 years, Brown Thomas for 3, Arnott's for 2, and certainly in terms of department stores, to be a success, they have to be a brand. And I think the Arnott's brand itself had become a little bit pushed into the background and maybe been overtaken by some of the brands that we were selling within the store. So what did we set about doing? We felt we had a gem, but it was a gem that had kind of lost its way a little bit and was a bit messy. Because of the property development side of things, we'd acquired a store in the Jervis Centre, which was the Arnott's store that was meant to become Arnott's when the existing Arnott's was knocked down, would you believe? So not only did we inherit that, we inherited a very, very demotivated workforce because they'd been told they were all going to be made redundant as a result of the relocation of Arnott's. So we weren't, probably just to set the scene, we probably weren't in particularly good shape. But what shone through all those early discussions was the passion from the staff about the brand, despite them having been somewhat messed about. And then we set about some customer research. One thing that I'll never forget was actually, there was a day that, I'm sure it wasn't the Irish Times, but some newspaper printed that we were going into administration. It was our busiest day of 2010. In terms of, and it wasn't just people coming to see if there was a bargain before we closed the doors. It was unbelievable. We had a huge amount of customers come into the store to talk to the staff. You underestimate the rapport that they build with a brand, but also with personal relationships, one-on-one with staff. So I'm not suggesting if your business is in trouble, you get the papers to leak that you're going into administration, but it was a good tactic of being incredibly trading well ahead of last year in terms of that particular week, but I don't think it's a long-term strategy that you should necessarily adopt. So I think the process we concluded we needed to go through was a relatively conventional one, and that is to do some, I'm not a great advocate of customer research for the sake of it. However, I do think it's very necessary. We worked with, I should mention, we worked with guys, I think Roddy and Gary are over there behind the bright light over there. They can wave to you all. You may know them from Genesis. And we worked with Genesis to undertake, if you like, a sort of brand and company strategy exercise. And that always starts with talking to your customers. I love the Henry Ford quote. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, when he said that on inventing the car, he said if he'd have asked the public what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. And I think I would preface my never quite sure about customer research. You have to do it, and you have to be very mindful of it, but they do want a faster horse. They don't necessarily think about what you can really offer them. So their feedback is not an excuse for us to not think and use our imagination and innovate in terms of what they might really want. But we did the research, and actually the customer research was even more compelling than the discussions with the staff. We had, and I'm not just saying it, we had incredible loyalty from the customers. I've never seen research where they were making excuses for you. I've seen customer research which is quite scathing, and normally maybe human nature is to be a bit more negative than it is positive when you're asked to give an opinion about something. But completely the opposite. So they were almost forgiving us for looking a little bit tired and a bit weary and maybe not having our act together. There was a real passion from them, from our brand. There's a huge loyalty. We have customers that come into Arnott's every single day of their lives. So with businesses like ours, you should never underestimate the power of your consumer and the fact that no matter what you do and what you change, they are your biggest advocate. So whether customers are sitting in their homes talking to people, whether they're sitting around a dinner table talking to people, the best recommendation you can ever get as a retailer, especially think as a department store, is that customer feedback and advocacy. So they can spread the word for you quicker than any advertising campaign. That doesn't mean we don't advertise, by the way, but just bear in mind the strength of that customer the power that they have. I think the strategy that we undertook was to work with the guys very closely to turn that research. We had workshops for all the staff. We wanted to involve all the staff in everything, and that can sometimes sound a bit corny, but we were very, very determined to do that. I felt very strongly about that because we had that great loyalty from them, and they had been put in a very difficult situation, no more difficult situation than being told you're going to lose your job. So we felt that we needed to include them. We needed to get their feedback. We had more so then, not an uncommon symptom of a business that's been around for a long time. We have a very rich mix of staff in terms of very long-serving members of staff mixed in with obviously newer, younger people within the organisation. The longer-serving members of staff are inevitably the hardest to convince when you look them in the eye and tell them you're going to implement a new strategy for the business when they've been 40 years doing their job. They've seen a few people stand up there and say the same thing, so they're a little bit more cynical about what you're going to do. But we put them all in the same room, and they were brilliant. So with the guys from Genesis, and we also work with a company called Lane 4, which you may have heard of, which is much more of a leadership-based company. They're based in the UK. They're headed by Adrian Morehouse, the ex-Olympic swimmer, and they train. They came out of training elite athletes. Clearly, something went wrong with me when they got involved with us. But they have a great philosophy. They, as I say, they work very closely with sports people to make good people great, is kind of their mission. And we were very keen. I was very keen to work with them to explore this sort of management versus leadership quandary that I'm sure we all have, where people can be very skilled managers, but times of crisis, which we were in, you need more than managers. You do need leaders and people to put their head above the parapet a bit. You certainly can't do it on your own when there's 800 staff. You need brand ambassadors and people around the business who can step up and take that responsibility for you and with you. And we certainly did, and we certainly do now, and I think every company does. So we've worked very closely with them and continue to work with them. So between Genesis and the guys in Lane 4, we coordinated sessions with... We invited everyone. We also invited our concession. So the most irritating thing in the world as a retailer is the consumer now thinks they know what a concession is. They'll talk to me over dinner parties, in the street. I was in your such and such concession the other day. It may not sound a big deal to you, but because obviously concessions, the natural thought process is that they kind of come into your store and lease a bit of space, so which is true. And it's their staff, not our staff, which is also true. So the trick for a business like ours is integrating concession staff who actually are employed and paid by someone else into your own philosophy to make sure that they are treating the customer in exactly the same way than your own staff are. And I think I say to the guys, if the customer knows the difference between a concession and our own Arnott staff, then we've failed, because they shouldn't get any different service from somebody, whether they're working in Topshop or whether they're working in our men's formal department. It's a challenge that every retailer has. So we put everyone in the mix. We invited everyone to those sessions. They were, I would say, without doubt, they're the most enjoyable, enlightening 2 hours I ever spent drinking a bit of wine and eating a bit of pizza with 100 people at a time from the organisation. We expected quite a lot of negativity, and we actually got sort of quite the opposite, really. We got a hugely positive, sort of optimistic. They were very passionate about the brand, as I've said, but they were also very excited about the fact that we had a lifeline. So you don't really know what reaction you're going to get until you get it, and I think they were also very grateful that we'd included them in it. So we did a really sort of quite basic sort of stop, start, continue type session with them. You know, what did they want us to do more of? What did they want us to stop? What did they want us to carry on doing? Those kind of things. And you know what? They are absolutely invaluable. And I'd say if you've not done them, do them, but also when you do them, you have to make sure you implement some of the things that come out of them, otherwise they're never going to come along to another one. So you really need to feel obliged to take their feedback. I'll never forget one pivotal moment in one of the sessions that we had. There was about 100 people. There was a real mix of, as I said, long-serving members of staff. In retail, you sort of, in department store worlds, you kind of almost have a shopping centre under one roof. So you have all these different businesses going on, which you have to knit together. And you tend to get the little clans of staff that come from these different places. The furniture guys are always the most cynical, because they've always been there the longest. They've always seen it all before. So the furniture, if you can crack it with a furniture salesman, then you've really got your brand rolling, I think. So we had a whole team of furniture in the corner, sort of looking at us with their arms folded. And then we had the beauty girls at the front, and a few other guys dotted around. And we were talking about how to integrate the longer serving members of staff, and we'd had some issues with industrial relations. We'd had some threats of strikes, etc., which we'd managed to avert. And one of the questions was what should we do? How can we improve our customer service within the organisation? And I'll never forget the girl from the benefit counter just stood up and said, you just need to get rid of the shit people. Which I think the furniture salesman nearly fell off their chairs in the corner. And it was just a pivotal moment in the whole process for us, because it kind of, I guess we realised we all stood a chance if you had people we didn't quite take that mindset on board. But then we had lots of nods of approval around the room, so there was definitely an appetite for them to change, which I guess is the most fearful thing when you're going through a transition period like we were, is do people have an appetite for change? Because change is really difficult, and as much as people say they want it, it's a very difficult thing for them to go through, and when they're in the midst of it, they don't really like it too much. So we sat through these meetings, and I guess from a strategic point of view, a little bit about where we ended up. There was a few key points in it. I think there's a very difficult, with a department store like Arnott's, if I can be a little critical of what was going on before, I think they were probably trying to be everything for everyone. That's not untypical of department stores. You kind of feel obliged to keep every consumer happy, and you can't. Harrods' motto, I can't tell you what it was because it was in Latin and I can't remember, and they'd kill me for forgetting, but it basically meant everything for everybody everywhere. And we went through a whole brand process with Harrods about 10 years ago, when we had Selfridges biting on our heels and catching up rapidly in the department store wars stakes in London. And we actually did away with the motto, which had been there since 1849, so it was a relatively controversial thing to do. But it was wrong, and we had to explain to people why we felt it was wrong. And it was the same for Arnott's in a way. I think there's a fear of if you're not trying to be everything for everyone, you're almost turning your back on consumer segments, which obviously on the face of it can be a dangerous thing to do. But you really can't. If you're trying to be everything for everyone aged 16 and younger, if you sell children's wear, up to 80, then you'll probably make an average job of all of it rather than a good job of some of it. And I think that's what we needed to go through. That was the hardest thing to convince the staff, because obviously they had a vision of Arnott's and a perception of Arnott's that frankly a lot of people had, and I think a lot of people still have. Some of you in this room will very much think of Arnott's as a destination for your mum, maybe, rather than yourself, or your grandma rather than yourself. But we set about trying to shake that perception, and you can't shake perceptions quickly. But we felt that we had to target a consumer that maybe we hadn't. So in a way, we gave birth, for want of a better word, to our target consumer, Sarah. We worked with Roddy and Gary tirelessly. I think they had, on about version 26, we finally painted this pen picture of Sarah. Sarah's a living, breathing thing now within Arnott's. I hate to talk about age because, one, you always offend people, and it's not so relevant anymore in retail. I think it's mindset. But the consumer that we had a lot of in Arnott's, that we probably didn't do a brilliant job for was that sort of, dare I say, 30 to 45-year-old lady. We certainly had her in store, but when we looked at our offer, we weren't particularly catering for her very well. We were probably catering for her mother better. But at the same time, we were also trying to cater for a very, very young audience at the same time. So we have Sarah, we have a picture of Sarah, which coming to the right picture of Sarah was even more of a drama. But we have a picture of Sarah that we all acknowledge. And pretty much, without playing it, everything we do reconcile back to Sarah. So if we're launching a new brand in Arnott's, if we're thinking of a new service proposition, then our philosophy is it has to be something that she would like. There are exceptions to that, but if we do go off and implement an exception, we really talk about it. So if we introduce a brand that's for 18-year-olds, rather than just doing it because we think it's a cool brand, we really talk about it because it's not for Sarah. So we've really focused very hard on that consumer. The reason we pick a girl is because 70 to 80% of our customers are female. An awful lot of the menswear we sell is bought by women for their husbands, partners that they think have very poor dress sense, which I think a lot of us guys do. We need the help. And also guys don't like shopping, generally. So girls do a lot of the shopping. And so 70 to 80% of our customers are female. So, but then we built a family around Sarah. So we also targeting her husband in that, her kids, her mum and dad, her grandparents. But we felt we needed a focus. So we called Sarah the bullseye customer, which I'm sure you've all heard of. But if we didn't have that, I genuinely don't think we would have made the progress we've made to date in terms of the brand proposition within the Arnott's business. Alongside that, we did work with the teams and the staff to come up with a vision statement, mission statement, values. Values were very much needed. Again, byproduct of losing your way a little bit is you do lose your way behaviourally as well, and I think there was a bit of that. I think we needed to kick ourselves into shape a bit and make sure that we understood how we needed to interact with each other and the customers, people not necessarily seeing their internal colleagues as customers, which of course they are. So, and the staff really enjoyed the process. So in terms of our vision, mission and values, it is something that we spent a lot of time on. Again, we got them all back together. We communicated very clearly what they were. We went through them with them. We discussed it with them. We set expectations around it. So now in terms of their annual goals, a significant portion of that is based around them demonstrating the values that we have as a business. And it is crucial. Some of them, I won't go through them all, but some of them are commercial, some of them are behavioural, but actually they're crucial in terms of setting the tone for the business. One of them is decency, and I think we were very passionate about that because byproduct of losing your way a little bit is you know, tempers get frayed and behaviour can worsen, if you like, and I think we've definitely seen that. So we included decency, where you had to be decent to your colleagues as well as your business colleagues, and if there was a difficult conversation to be had, have it, but do it the right way rather than the wrong way, because there was a bit of that going on. So that was really the process. Again, happy to take any questions on it, but we did go through a relatively conventional process, but it's absolutely vital, and it's still, to this day, we talk about it, we live, eat and breathe it every day, and I think if we hadn't have done that, then we wouldn't have made the process, we wouldn't have made the progress that we have. I'll go back to the management side of it a little bit. Obviously, alongside these strategies, we did formulate a business strategy wrapped around the brand strategy. Again, very straightforward. It was a lot of points that we felt we needed to do and work on to make the business strong again. A lot of it was environmental. The store was a bit confusing in terms of its layout, so there was quite a bit of work we needed to do to make sure that it flowed better for the customer and made more sense. There was some commercial decisions around that as well. So some of the areas that we've worked on. Those of you that have been in Arnott's, how many of you been in Arnott's in the last 6 months? Be honest. That's quite impressive. Thank you very much for your custom. Then you'd have seen a lot of the areas we've changed. We had a menswear department split across 2 floors. As I said before, men are very difficult shoppers because you don't find many guys that enjoy shopping like girls do. So we made it simple for the guys and put all of menswear onto 1 floor. And it was the ground floor. So we consolidated the business together. And also, in order to get some of the brands to come into Arnott's that we wanted to secure, we had to give them a prime location on the ground floor. Flip side of that, where men's was, we built a new technology area. For a brand like Arnott's is, and one thing I really didn't like when we went through those initial discussions was the strategy had always been built around being like somebody else. So somebody had a strategy of Arnott's being like Selfridges. Somebody had a strategy of Arnott's being like House of Fraser. You know, Arnott's was very much, the strategy we built around Arnott's was Arnott's being Arnott's, because if you don't do that, then if all you're aspiring to be is somebody else, then state the obvious, they'll do a better job of it than you. So you had to, and we took some criticism actually, because in terms of positioning the brand, we took it slightly upmarket. And certainly in the times we're in, I certainly got quite a lot of questions about that, certainly from externally and internally too. Why are we doing that? But we did that because in terms of the competitive landscape, we had to pick a market that we felt we could dominate. And that market certainly wasn't down market, because in the value sector is ruthless. There's lots of people doing a great job. I don't know if there's anyone here from Pennies. I think Pennies, Primark probably do the best job of all in terms of, and I mean globally in terms of that value market. You know, they're such a powerhouse now that if you try and compete with those guys, then there's only one winner, and it's them. We had the invasion of competition from the UK over here in recent years. We had House of Fraser and Debenhams come over. Obviously, Debenhams bang opposite Arnott's with a very big store. So again, they are competition by default. So we had to make sure that we had a point of difference from them. So I guess where we pitched ourselves was sort of higher end, but not luxury. We're sort of upper middle, if you like. We're a sort of premium department store. I don't like any of those words, but nobody's ever thought of one that's better. But if you like, that's where we picture ourselves. So in terms of our competitive landscape, Brown Thomas do a really good job of that whole luxury sector. In the times we're in as well, there's no point trying to get into that sector for now. Debenhams do a very good job at the sort of very mid-market value-oriented offer, and they are very good at it. These guys have 160 stores. They have great buying power, so you, again, try and compete with them, you'll fail. I suppose if you like, House of Fraser are our biggest competitor in terms of overlap of brands and offer. So, but if you like, Arnott's USP, and I would say the backbone of the business is homewares, and homewares, furniture, and that's why we brought on the whole electrical and technology area last year, because we felt it was an area that we could absolutely dominate, and I think we do. I think we do have the best home and furniture offer in the country, one of the best offers if you look across UK and Ireland. I think we're very much up there with the best of them. So I think that was really something that we had to leverage to bring in brands where we were lacking a bit on the fashion side of things and accessories, and our recent invention, the ladies' shoe department, which I'm sure some of you have been in. I hope you have. Called the Shoe Garden, which has been a huge commercial success for us, which, thank God, it almost became called the Shoe Garden by default, actually. It was sort of a name that we came up as a working title for it, but now all the customers have latched onto it, so we pretended it was intentional. But it's been a huge commercial success. So, you know, in terms of this north-south divide that exists within Dublin, I experienced the very same thing with Harrods and Selfridges, you know, getting people that are regular shoppers in one area, getting them to change their shopping habits is incredibly difficult. But some of the things we did, we concluded we had to we had to make sure that we were getting people into the store that don't normally shop there. Strategically, it's easier to try and sell more stuff to the people that are in your store than try and get new customers in. But you have to do both, especially at the moment. So we've used things like the shoe department probably being the best example, and the restaurants as well that we've developed with Clode and McKenna. Credit to them, we won the Best Newcomer Restaurant Award at the National Hospitality Awards this week in the Four Seasons, which we're really proud of, because actually for a department store to be in the restaurant business is exactly what we were aspiring to do. And we wanted to present our customers with something that was more than just a shopping experience. We wanted them to come into the restaurants and maybe do some shopping. Whereas before, what they did was came into Arnott's, and while they were there, maybe they had a cup of coffee or a snack. But hopefully we've been able to turn that around without alienating any of our existing customers. And I would emphasize that as I'm coming towards the end, but with the focus on Sarah, we had to focus on her to stay alive, but we didn't turn our back on anyone else. And we've had that discussion with the staff. Some of them felt we have. And if I'm honest, I think we have lost a few customers, but I don't think we've lost many. The 92-year-old lady that has a roast dinner in the restaurant every day of her life, well, 5 days a week, she doesn't come in on weekends, still comes in and loves it. And Clode and McKenna looks after her 3 days a week while she's there. So I don't think we've lost that older customer. I don't think we've intimidated them, but we've certainly made changes that they have had to get used to. But I think we had to make those changes in order to survive. So in terms of the evolution, you'll read in the newspaper that we have made an investment in the business of about 5 million. Suppliers and partners have invested with us, so they've invested about another 6 or 7 million on top of that. So in 2.5 years, there is about 12 million of investment gone into the building. Testament to our team that our partners have invested more than us, if you know what I mean. So we've been able to secure that investment because we just didn't have the money ourselves. I'll wrap up just on the people side of things, because it is the most fundamental part of any business's success is people, as we all know. And having a team in place to execute all of this is absolutely vital. And I think we have. We made some difficult changes, again, of that type are always difficult to make, so we did have to go through some changes of personnel and bring in some new people. We also had to make 17 redundancies of managers from the shop floor. We had, not untypical of the retail business, we had people that had worked up through the chain. But the big mistake that had been made previously was that our best salespeople had been promoted to be managers in order to kind of keep them, if you know what I mean, which is the worst possible thing in the world, because the best salespeople in the world are just not very good managers. So an awful lot of people that had been promoted through the ranks for the wrong reasons. So of the 17 redundancies we made, 6 of the 17 went back to being really good salespeople, thank goodness. But unfortunately, we did lose some, and we brought in 5 or 6 professional retail managers from outside, because I haven't talked about product and service, because they're kind of fundamental within any retailer, and I'm sure you appreciate that if you don't get your product right and your service right, then you're dead. You don't really have a retail business. So I thought it would be perhaps more interesting to talk about the other stuff. But we have had a huge focus on both. Obviously brought in a huge amount of new brands into the store that we felt we needed to. Hopefully they appeal to Sarah and her husband and her extended family. And also, on the service side of things, we measure out. In retail, you're only ever as good as the last person you served. And actually, it's sometimes when you want a quiet pint in O'Brien's, and then you always get caught by somebody telling you about the service experience they have in Arnott's, whether it's good or bad. Where sometimes there's the odd moment you like to hear it most of the time. Sometimes you don't, but people do tell you anyway. But they'll talk more about the negative ones. So we've tried to put a whole process in place. I'm not saying they don't happen, because nobody's perfect, but I think we've got better. We have mystery shops. We have a whole process in place to make sure that our teams are aspiring to offer a better, much more competent level of service to everyone. If you want to, through questions, I can talk about the marketing strategy that we've employed. Obviously, some of that has changed, and happy to talk about that. We did, I think it's just to finish on when we set about our mission, you sometimes have to take a flyer, and I think some of the things we did early on, I always use it. My favourite example of it, of a brand bringing themselves to life, was back in the late 90s when Burberry reinvented themselves with Kate Moss. And actually, Kate Moss was the most fundamental part of it, because they didn't really even have a range of clothes at that point. But Rosemary Bravo, who's a genius, took the big decision to perhaps just to kickstart things by making a big furore. And I guess the rest is history for them. So sometimes you have to take a flyer. Our equivalent of Kate Moss was putting an ice rink on the roof of Arnott's and employing a doorman, which is not exactly Kate Moss, I don't think. But it's an example of us doing stuff to draw attention to ourselves and to bring people into the store and implement things that customers notice a change before you've made those fundamental changes in store. And we certainly had to do a few of those. We got 40,000 people skating on the roof of Arnott's on an ice rink. I'll never live it down, the criticism I got for doing it, and the hassle from health and safety. And we had people in suits queuing up to close it down, but we managed to keep them at bay. But we sometimes you have to just try these things and do something. It's very easy for retailers to make changes. They think the customer will notice, but that isn't always the case. But you notice a doorman standing on the door to greet you and tell you where to find what you're looking for, and you certainly notice an ice rink on the roof. So we did take a bit of a flyer with some of the things early on just to get the message out. I could keep talking forever, but I won't. But that's it. But equally, I would love to take some questions if you guys have any on any of what I've talked about. Much appreciated.